Hello everyone, ObsidiusFan here for a special Halloween countdown. Now, I know what you may be thinking, but ObsidiusFan, Halloween is a holiday about the scary and disturbing stuff. How are you going to celebrate it with such an odd topic? Well, in my eyes, this is also a holiday about monsters. So I am here to celebrate it by paying homage to my favorite type of monster, giant monsters. And if you still don't think this topic is fitting for Halloween, well, give me a break! We don't even celebrate Halloween in Argentina! The word kaiju is Japanese for a strange creature, and it's been used to refer to giant and destructive monsters that mostly originated from Japan. You know, like Godzilla or Gamera. And yet, this word has been used like this way even before Pacific Rim. The video game industry is full of badass giant monsters, and I am here today to count down what I think are the best ones, based on their design, abilities, powers and backstories, whether they are bosses, playable characters or anything else. Of course, there is a big variety of types of kaijus, so I will list down some rules so you can understand which ones I considered for this list. I am looking for mindless monsters with no established personalities, so no characters like Ganon or Bowser. Gods and or deities are also out because that would be like cheating. Also, even if they can be considered as kaijus, giant robots or mechas are cut as well, since I feel they deserve an entirely different list of their own. Of course, this is a list about video game kaijus, so the monster must have originated exclusively from games, so no Godzilla, King Kong, Gamera or etc. And finally, one kaiju per franchise, and for this special occasion, I will bend the rules a bit. They may be either only from games I played or from games I have good knowledge about, even if I didn't play them before. Obviously, I am going to miss a kaiju or two that you may love but you won't find on the list, so please, be mature about my opinion and feel free to tell me about your favorite giant monster in the comments. I know that this sounds like a lot of rules for a simple topic, but it will make sense once you see the list itself. So, now that everything has been said, let's dive right into my top 10 video game kaijus. We kick off this list with a classic kaiju game, the Rampage series. This is a little franchise of arcade games in which you get to control a bunch of giant monsters and get to destroy large cities in order to win points. While I could have easily made a tie between the three main characters of the franchise, George, Lizzie and Rolfe, I finally decided to put George at number 10 as he is obviously the more iconic monster out of the three. In Rampage Total Destruction, we get to see George's backstory in a hilarious animated cutscene. He was the first person to ever try the scam soda and get transformed into a kaiju. George became a giant gorilla, obviously based off King Kong. This monster is not only very intimidating, but he's also very efficient at destroying cities, especially with all the athletic abilities that a gorilla has. And that's pretty much all I can say about George and the main reason he is so low. The Rampage series of games is very fun and all, but it gets mindless and repetitive at times, especially since all of the monsters play almost the same to each other. So you should feel lucky to be on this list, George. I wonder if his name was inspired by another destructive ape I know. Most of the kaijus featured on this list are either giant bosses or playable characters in arcade or fighting games. But at the number 9 spot we have something much more unique, the Leviathan from Devil May Cry 3. This franchise is full of other kaijus that I could have chosen, like Phantom or Beowulf, but the Leviathan not only deserves to be here because of his gigantic size, but also because there is an entire level that takes place inside of it. The beast itself has an intimidating and badass design, similar to a flying whale, and it's Dante at the beginning of Mission 8 in a hilarious way. The level inside of the Leviathan is one of the most memorable in the game, with a creepy atmosphere and interesting design, as you go through the insides of a giant kaiju while you avoid the creature's digestive fluids and fight hordes of demons and even giant worms that live inside of it. Damn, this Leviathan is very unhealthy. At the end of the level, you have to fight its heart in a very strange yet entertaining boss battle that will finally get Dante out of the demonic creature's body. The Leviathan from DMC3 deserves a spot on the list, not only because he's just gigantic and he looks badass, but also because he's one of gaming's most unique kaijus, with an entire level taking place inside of its stomach. Oddly enough, this reminds me of something else. Of course! Dante's Pinocchio and the Leviathan is Monstro! At least that's my new headcanon. Dante's Inferno, a fairly underrated hack-and-slash game that, while it's way too similar to God of War, it's actually a very fun game that features a unique retelling of the Divine Comedy that you will never see on any books at your library at school. All the way through his adventure, you play as Dante, no, not that Dante, who will have to face the giant monster at number 8 many times, the Asterian beasts. At first, it seems like these are nothing more than badass bosses, and they are, but after dealing some damage, you can actually get to control these beasts, and it's so awesome! While Dante Alighieri takes control of the Asterian beast, you feel as if nothing can stop you. You can stomp, eat, and even breathe fire at your enemies, destroy big structures with the monster's hands, and even perform some clunky yet entertaining platforming sections. It's fun, it's badass, and it makes you feel very powerful. Haha, this is how playing as a kaiju should always feel like. Every time you get to control one of these beasts is definitely some of the best parts of this game. Combined with a very unique and fearsome design, and the giant Asterian beasts deserve a place on this list, as controlling a kaiju never felt so good, and it actually reminds me of Crash Mind Over Mutant in some way. At number 7 we have Kraid from the Metroid series. Now, the protagonist Samus Aran has faced a lot of gigantic beasts on her adventures, but nothing as gigantic and menacing as Kraid. I am aware some of you may have expected Ridley to be on this list, but not only he has an established personality, but he's also not big enough for me. And hey, I still support the idea of Ridley being in Super Smash Bros., so having him on here would be contradicting myself. But I digress. Samus has faced Kraid a few times on the different Metroid games, and he always appears as an enormous, dinosaur-like monster who takes up multiple screens at the same time. I have to give the bounty hunter some credit. If I had to fight this thing, I'd shit myself and run away! Kraid himself is a very natural fighter. He doesn't use his weapons, not even fire. He attacks with his body, claws, teeth and tentacles in order to kill his enemies, and the battles against him are always some of the most challenging yet memorable ones in the Metroid franchise. However, what keeps him so low is the fact that he had very few appearances so far. He was originally going to appear in Metroid Prime with a very cool redesign, but he was scrapped for some reason. Oh, poor Kraid. This beast's only 3D appearance so far is in Super Smash Bros. Melee, and it's also the best way to see how much of an epic kaiju he is. His stage hazard in the Brinstar of Death's stage, and just like in the Metroid games, he takes up almost the entire screen. So badass! I really wish Nintendo makes a new 3D Metroid game very soon, because I'd love to see Kraid as a boss battle in a 3D game. That, and well, I just wanna see more of Samus's beautiful booty! You thought I was not going to include a kaiju from the Kingdom Hearts franchise? Because if you did, then you don't know me at all! But seriously, these games have some really impressive giant monsters, from Heartless like the Storm Rider and Darkseid to the huge Twilight Thorn Nobody. They are all part of amazing boss battles. But I finally had to go with the biggest enemy Sora and his friends ever faced, the Ground Shaker from Kingdom Hearts 2. Now just take a look at this Heartless. It's enormous! And even if the battle itself is not one of the hardest, it's definitely one of the most entertaining in the entire franchise. After Simba managed to overcome the fears of being the new king of the Pridelands world, the dark ghost of Scar that had been haunting him joined together in this titanic Heartless boss. Now that's a really creative backstory for a kaiju if I ever saw one. And like most Heartless bosses, the Ground Shaker has a colorful and great design that fits the world it appears in. But the boss battle itself is really where it's at. Simba and Lion Sora will have to avoid the Ground Shaker's giant feet and magic spells until you can activate one of the most badass reaction commands in the game. After you deal enough damage with it, you will be able to climb up on the Kaiju's back and hit the shaman on its back for some real damage. With an interesting creation method, a memorable design, and a really entertaining boss battle, the Ground Shaker from Kingdom Hearts 2 deserves the recognition of one of gaming's best giant monsters, and I can't wait to see what type of other giant enemies will appear in Kingdom Hearts 3. It's weird, but this is the third time I talk about the Hydra from God of War 1 in one of my videos. I mean, it's weird because not only I prefer other bosses in the franchise, but I also prefer God of War 2 as a game altogether. But I digress, because no matter how many times I bring it up, I can't deny the level of awesomeness of the Hydra. Obviously based on the classic monster from Greek mythology, the Hydra appears right at the beginning of the original God of War, and it introduced everyone to the epic giant battles this franchise is famous for. The numerous heads of the kaiju will appear all the way through the level and try to eat everyone's favorite bald douchebag. Kratos will have to both avoid these menacing heads and defeat them many times until he reaches the central head, the Hydra King, which makes you realize how gigantic this monster really is. And the battle itself does not disappoint, as you will have to kill the little heads so you can climb up to the ship's mast and have an epic showdown against the Hydra King that ends up with a badass and satisfying quick time event. Haha. There are a lot of gigantic bosses in the God of War franchise, but the Hydra deserves to be on this list, not only because of how iconic it is, and well, because it looks really freaking awesome, but mainly because of how memorable and entertaining his first appearance was. Truly, one of gaming's best kaijus, and I just hope that I won't talk about the Hydra on my videos anymore. At number 4 we have Water Violante, also known as Perfect Chaos from the Sonic the Hedgehog games. I'm personally not a big fan of the Sonic franchise, but I have to give credit where credit is due, because there really are a lot of amazing kaijus and even giant robots in this franchise that I could have chosen for the list, but I have to give the spot to Perfect Chaos. The main antagonist of Sonic Adventure 1, Chaos is a KO mutated by the Master Emerald, who was considered to be a god, but technically isn't, so I am not breaking any rules here. During the events of the game, this odd monster made entirely of water will face Sonic and his friends in order to get the Chaos Emeralds. What's really interesting about Chaos is that you actually get to see him evolving into different beast-like forms until he gets into his kaiju final form. Perfect Chaos is just an amazing giant monster. When he reaches this form, he becomes a destructive beast who goes on a rampage that destroys and even floods an entire city, perfectly fitting for a kaiju. His design may not look like much special at first, but like I said before, he looks exactly like a water version of the beloved Godzilla monster Violante, and I wouldn't be surprised if Sonic Team did this on purpose. Perfect Chaos not only destroys City with his tentacles and hydrokinetic abilities, but he can also shoot a devastating laser beam from his mouth that makes him look even more like a classic kaiju. In both Sonic Adventure and Generations, the boss battles against this badass water monster are amazing, with a lot of adrenaline to them. Overall, Perfect Chaos has an interesting backstory, badass abilities of destruction, and a lot of reference to classic kaiju. This water monster is truly one of the high points of the entire Sonic franchise and deserves a spot on my list. I really hope he appears again in a future Sonic game. That would sure make me more interested in the franchise. Oh yeah, I finally get to talk about this monster. Pretty high on the list we have Obsidius from the game Godzilla Unleashed. Now, even if he is part of the Godzilla franchise, Obsidius was created exclusively for a video game, so he still qualifies for this list. And besides, come on, you all expected him to appear on here. You know I am a big fan of Obsidius. You could say I am a big Obsidius fan. Haha! Okay, I am really sorry for that cheap and awful joke. Anyways, back when Godzilla Unleashed was in development, a poll was held by the developer so the fans could choose one new monster to include in the game. And while I would have loved to see any of these kaijus in the game, Obsidius was the winner and I fell in love with him in the moment I saw him. The design itself was already a selling point for me. The Godzilla franchise lacked a real fire and lava kaiju, but Obsidius delivered with a badass design that makes him look like a mindless magma monster who only wants to destroy everything in his path. However, I must admit that Obsidius' design could use some work to make him look less generic, but it still gets the job done. Obsidius was created when the crystals that Space Godzilla used in order to conquer the Earth fell into a volcano and created life in it. So yeah, Obsidius is literally a walking volcano! That's so awesome! And while his origin story is a bit gimmicky, it still is memorable and fits into the lore of the game. In both versions of Godzilla Unleashed, Obsidius is definitely one of my favorite monsters to use while fighting. He's heavy and very strong, but he's way more mobile than other heavyweight kaijus in the game, and he can even curl up in a ball of destruction like Angirius. Combined with the fact that he can shoot magma out of his mouth, and you got yourself a very destructive monster. Oh, and he's obviously the only character in the game that doesn't get damaged by the lava rivers in the Seattle stage. Pretty cool, huh? Overall, Obsidius was a breath of fresh air for the Godzilla franchise back when he was created. And while he may look a bit generic, he definitely deserves a spot on the list, with his amazing backstory, design and abilities. I really hope he and his brother Crystalak appear in a Godzilla movie someday in the future. No wonder why this badass kaiju became the mascot of such a handsome YouTuber. Okay, there you have some scary Halloween material. I was really tempted to put all of the giant colossi from Shadow of the Colossus on here. I mean, that game is full of amazing giant beasts. But there's also Little Zenobia and Little Silosia, whom I fucking despise. But I ultimately had to decide on which Colossus fit the term of kaiju better. I thought of Malus, the final boss of the game, and I even thought of Avion, the best boss in the game. But I finally decided for not only the biggest Colossus, but also one of the most unique and memorable ones, Phalanx, the 13th Colossus. Now, like I just said, I really prefer the battle against Avion in every single way, but Phalanx is the most interesting of all the Colossi in the game. First of all, there's its size. Look at this thing, it's freaking huge! The moment you see Phalanx, you feel goosebumps, as you seem just like an insignificant little bug to him, and that's one of the many feelings this game has going for it. The design of Phalanx is very unique and memorable, like all of the Colossi in the game, and you can tell a lot of effort was put into it. I mean, he's a giant flying dragon in the desert. What's not to love about it? However, the best thing about this colossal kaiju is the fight against it. Wonder will have to shoot the air sacs on Phalanx's belly, and then reach its wings while riding on aggro, which fills you with adrenaline in such a fantastic way. After you finally reach the wings, Wonder will have to carefully climb up to its back and stab the multiple weak points on Phalanx's back. Something that I found really challenging and entertaining. I must admit that running through Phalanx gave me one of the most epic feelings I had in my entire gaming life, especially with the amazing music and graphics that wrap you up in a legendary atmosphere. Truly one of the best boss battles in gaming history. Aside from its gigantic size, unique design and unforgettable boss battle, what ultimately made me put Phalanx so high on the list was his behavior. Most kaiju featured on the list are mindless monsters of destruction, and this is also very true for every Colossus in Shadow of the Colossus. But Phalanx is different, as it's the only boss in the game that doesn't even try to attack Wonder, yet he still got killed by him because of Wander's desire for revenge. Phalanx's death really makes you think of everything you've done in the entire game. Truly tragic, eh? Now the question is, what kaiju could beat Phalanx? Well, let's dive right into the number 1 spot to find out. War of the Monsters is a must-buy for every kaiju fan. It's a 3D fighting game in which giant monsters have to fight each other in huge destructible environments, and it's just buckets of fun to play, especially with friends. Like Shadow of the Colossus, I was tempted to put every monster in a honorable number 1 spot, but I just had to choose one. The kaijus in this game may not be the biggest ones, but they make up for that with their amazing designs and destructive abilities. And even still, they all are pretty huge anyways. It was hard to choose the number 1 spot, seriously. There's Kongar, the obvious homage to King Kong, Ultra B, the obvious homage to Japanese mechas, and Magmo, who was possibly the best lava kaiju until Obsidius' creation. I was almost going to put the amazing lizard Togera on this spot, who is the obvious love child of Godzilla and Baraka from Mortal Kombat after a long night of passionate sex. Now there you have some disturbing imagery for Halloween. But I finally came to the conclusion. The best kaiju in War of the Monsters and in all of gaming, it's Kineticlops. What's not to love about this guy? Look at him! Kineticlops has so many unique and awesome things to him that I don't know how to explain why I love him so much. First of all, the design. Kineticlops' design is as creative as a kaiju can get. The idea of a single eyeball covered in an electric body may seem dumb at first, but it's actually pretty genius, and it fits into the theme of classic sci-fi movies of the game. And he actually got some sweet basketball skills with that eye of him. On the battlefield, Kineticlops is one of my favorite kaijus to use in the game alongside Togira. He's very fast and agile, as you would expect from an electric character, and even with his speed, Kineticlops still has a lot of strength to battle his enemies with, especially when he uses his eyeball and electricity in form of a chain for a strong heavy attack. Kineticlops' range attacks are also very useful in battle. I may prefer fire as an element, but this guy and King Ghidorah taught me that electrokinetic kaijus are the best ones. His electric projectiles have some really good homing effects to them, and his special attacks, while not the best in the game, are really powerful and feel very good to use, especially that electroshock that even a Sith Master would be proud of. Aside from his unique design and amazing strength, what finally made me choose Kineticlops over the other monsters was his backstory. Every kaiju in War of the Monsters was created after a UFO invasion was annihilated by the humans, but the alien radiation from the destroyed UFOs created monsters in different ways. Kineticlops was created when the alien radiation reached an electric cable which hit a human who finally mutated into the monster itself. I don't know, maybe I am reading way too much into this, but the idea of a human turning into a kaiju is something I've never heard of before, and I am very interested in exploring this concept if a sequel to this game is ever made. I mean, can you imagine being turned into a mindless monster of destruction against your will? Okay, yeah, it would be badass to be a kaiju, but it must not feel right to lose all of your humanity like that. In conclusion, Kineticlops was a fantastic creation by the developers of War of the Monsters, with a creative design and concept, powerful and useful battle abilities, and one of the most unique backstories for a giant monster I've ever seen. I really hope we see him and his friends in a sequel for War of the Monsters someday. Because of this, I think Kineticlops is the best kaiju that originated from a video game. I am ObsidiusFan, thanks a lot for watching, and I wish you a happy Halloween. Ha 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 ha!